Welcome to Charts Today. It is Thursday, the 18th of June, and there's so much going on. I'm not even sure where to start. First of all, we'll look at the US bond market. Notice here we've got a new downside target. That's a thrust off the high point, then a pullback to a lower high, and now making lower lows, activating a downside target. That is relief for the US market. Basically, the Fed has held rates, and we have an interest rate decision today from the Bank of England, and the expectation is that they will hold too. We had a surprise on inflation being lower than expected this week, and almost certainly the Bank of England will hold. And we're seeing the UK bond market also giving us a new downside target. If we look at Japan, which has been the concern in bond markets, we see that the yield hasn't yet activated the downside target here yet, so not quite as bearish, or not the risk spike that we've seen in the West. German bond markets also have big upside targets, waiting to see if we activate this new downside target as well. A lot will depend on the European Central Bank and what they do with rates. The interesting thing is that we are effectively seeing this dollar index uncertainty. This trend has been going on sideways, very tight sideways trend for over a year now, and we just have to wait and see which way we break. If we look at the 60-minute chart, we can see we do have a little bit of upside target there on rates being held, and the reaction is a little bit to the upside, but not enough to shift the dial on the daily chart. So really quite interesting there. And of course, if we look at sterling, we are going to effectively see whether we break to the downside or the upside. We're seeing there potentially a move lower. If we look at the 60-minute chart, we already have a target there, despite the Bank of England's decision not yet being out. The expectation is the guidance will be quite key as always. And if we look at the Japanese yen, we are seeing here that on that daily chart, even though they've raised rates to 1%, which is the highest level for decades, it is not having enough of an impact on curtailing the currency weakness. So we expect to see more intervention from the Bank of Japan. So looking at stocks, we can see, first of all, that we've got, well, in fact, we have a quick look at Bitcoin, first of all. Still looking pretty weak on the daily. The 60-minute chart for Bitcoin, downside targets there, that's also looking weak. And the key point there is that we are in a downtrend, and the weekly chart is also very bearish. This is the Nasdaq. Interestingly, we're seeing that these US stock indices are struggling to make new highs, another new downside target. And in fact, I covered that on TradingView today. I'll put the link in there. So I've covered it in TradingView as well. Targets on TradingView. And today we're announcing the targets on ChartIQ, which is another platform. So get used to seeing these targets in many, many different places. So this is a really brilliant Java-based system, which is used by lots of brokers and banks. So now they're on TradingView. We expect to see them being more widely spread as well. So on TradingView and on ChartIQ, of course on Bloomberg and on Updater. So get used to seeing the targets in lots of different places. So do follow me on TradingView, David_Linton. And we're looking here at the Nasdaq. The S&P future is up. We are seeing the futures up, but the fact is that we're struggling to make a new high above that high that we saw last week. So markets just looking some inherent weakness there. The FTSE future also lower, and that is just waiting to see if we activate a downside target. We are in a seesaw here. If we look at the daily chart, we can see nothing like the US markets, which have been going up quite strongly. DAX is flat. Japan was up quite strongly. The Sensex a little bit up, but no big deal there. And Australia was lower. big news, of course, is what's going on in the Middle East. A deal already signed. If we look at the oil markets, we can see here downside targets. This is WTI just finding support on $75, but looks set to go lower. And if we look at the 60-minute chart, we can see these downside targets, just daggers pointing down, follow the train tracks. If we look at just the whole energy mix, it's pretty bearish. And we put our energy call out to clients this morning. Gas prices lower. If I look at my screen with all the price targets and key levels, I can see here the trends as well. Lots of scores in the miners. We're neutral on the weekly chart on TTF, but bearish on the daily and the 60-minute. So that's giving us a trend score there, if you like. And that trend score is how we really get to where the performance is when we want to look at stocks. So if I look at the Dow, this is my list on the Dow. This is them ranked alphabetically. I can see the percentage change yesterday for the Dow was only 4 stocks up. And guess what? 3 of those 4 have scores of 6. And that 6 is based on the weekly chart being 3, the daily chart being 2, and the 1-minute chart being 1 on the Ichimoku cloud. So this is where I know the performance is in the Dow, and no big surprises. It's in the financials, which we've been talking about. If you want to understand that, there is a paper on trend scoring which I submitted to the US active international active investment managers, and that explains the whole idea of trend scoring. And you can basically get that on update on the website, resources, trend scoring, lots of free resources there. And then tomorrow I'm actually doing an LSEG masterclass, which will be put up on Fibonacci retracements, so you can watch that there too. Lots of free stuff, and if you want to do the intense training course, then that's available to you there as well. So looking at the performance in the Dow, you can see we've got Caterpillar. This is on the if we go to the daily chart, looking very strong there, breaking to new highs, upside target. And I know this is where the performance are because this is where those multiple trends are. You can see they're just waiting to break on JP Morgan. Travelers also looking very strong, not so clear on the targets there. And if we look at Goldman Sachs, also strong there as well. We can see the downside, Salesforce very badly hit yesterday. That's making new lows. Look at that. That target was given way back there and now being met. And we can see even Microsoft giving up another 4% yesterday. So really, having given that failed signal and a failed recovery, we're back below the cloud with a new downside target. So you do have to watch that. And that showed up in the 60 minutes charts, first of all. So do keep an eye on that. Last of all, a look at the FTSE. We see just a handful of stocks that are up in the FTSE. Not so good for Melrose. They might be the strong performer. This is where the trends would show. And if Informa, another one that's up, but relatively weak, just breaking out there. So that could be quite interesting. Polar is one of the strong performers, but we can see from today that we do have a lot of stocks falling. So all in all, the market is not looking as strong as you might imagine. And of course, last of all, the SpaceX chart is the one that everyone has been watching. This is really quite fascinating. These are the daily candles. That's a bearish engulfing candle, by the way, or kind of. It's the range is a little bit out of there, but we can see that's a pretty bearish candle after 3 days of trading, or 2.5 days. We go to the 60-minute. We're starting to get a little bit more of a picture. And of course, the 1 minute, this is where we're getting all the targets. Look at that. That's SpaceX. You can follow them here or on TradingView, and soon you'll be able to follow them on ChartIQ. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, have a great day. Bye for now.